Hello and welcome to this demonstration of the CS Cloud environment that you are going to use for all the labs in this course. The first thing you need is the credentials to log into the web interface. So in the right hand menu of the course homepage you will find a link to the lab cloud. You will see some more information here now which you don't see when you're logged in. That's because I'm logged in, so I have a bit more, but you will have this link, CS Cloud, and here you will find a link to the web graphical interface. You have your username, and that username is for the OpenStack Cloud or CS Cloud. And here we have the password. You don't see it here. You have to click this name to show it. I won't do that now. And then we have the Windows password that I was talking about. This password isn't used anywhere when you start. This is the password that you need to use in the Windows, both the clients and the servers, so that I then can log on and help you if you need, or correct your lab assignments. You also have a link to your key pair, and these are the files that are used when you are trying to access your Linux machines. So we can start off by looking at the graphical interface. First off, I need my username, and then when you go to cscloud.lnu.se, you will get this login. And now I will go over and take my password. And when you are logged in, you will get this overview. You see that you have 15 instances that you can use. You have a couple 20 CPUs and 20 gigs of RAM. You also have 5 floating IPs. These are the IPs that you can assign to your machines so that you can access them from the internet. You have these called security groups. You have 10 of them that you can use. 3 are already there, and I will show them soon. And these are the firewall rules, you can say, if you want to access from out the network and in. The volumes and storage you won't be using that much that you have been given anyways. And then we have on the compute part, we have instances, images, and key pairs. Instances is where you will have your machines. So now we don't have any machines, so here you can, when you have created them, you can see them here. Images are the different images that are available. This list may change, and it usually will be specified in the lab what image you should use. If it's just saying a Linux machine, then you're free to choose, but I would recommend Ubuntu Server 18.04. And when it comes to Windows, you have 2 versions of the server, and you will learn more about those later on in the course. Key pairs I have pre-created for you, and this is only the public part that OpenStack has, and it will put that in your Linux machines. And then you can download the private key from the course homepage. That was the last link, so to say. The other parts that we can look at, volumes and container infrastructure and orchestration, you won't be using in this course. But we have the networks, and here I also have pre-created an environment for you. If you go to graph, you can see that we have public. This is the internet. So the internet comes in to the router this way, and then we have 2 different networks. One that is called your username dash LAN, and that is for the private network where you will set up Windows machines mostly and file servers. And then we have the DMC where we should put our publicly accessed servers. It could be the DNSs or the web servers and that kind of servers. I have, as you see, pre-created this network, so you don't have to do anything in the network part. We have the security groups, and here I also have pre-created 2. The default is always there. I've modified it so you don't need to use that one. But if you want a machine, if you have a machine in the LAN, the local area network, the private network, it should use this security group. If it doesn't have that, your machines cannot communicate within that network. So you need to have that one. And also for the DMC, the public access servers should also have that security group. These make sure that the different networks can't communicate between each other, and that's a security feature. And then you can look at your floating APs. I don't have any now. You can pre-allocate that you want to use later on, but I wouldn't recommend that. Only allocate a floating AP when you need one. So the next step is, how do you create a machine? So you go to Compute, Instances. And my plan now here is to show you how to create some sort of a jump machine. A machine which you can connect to from the internet, and from that machine you then can administer the other machines within the local network in our CS Cloud. So I think we will create a jump machine based on Windows. So we click on Launch Instance. You give it a name. And as I said on the previous lecture, you should always choose this education availability zone. Never use research. And then we will always use an image to start from, a source. And we should not create a volume. And here we see a different kind of images. You should never use this Windows 10 Education 1703. You should use this this machine if we are talking about Windows client 1607. If you would create one based on this, the only thing that will happen is you can't create a password for it, so you can't use it. You have to delete it. So we choose this one as an image to start from. And then we have a flavor, and Windows likes memory, RAM memory. So you can get around with 1 gig, but I would recommend almost to take 2 gigs for the jump machine. Then on the servers you can use 1 gig maybe. So we use a 2 gig version. And then we have networks, and here you have to choose which network the machine should be in. Within the DMC you won't be using Windows. There you only will be placing Linux machines. So this is Windows, we will use the LAN for this. And then the security groups, I haven't chosen created any now. You only have this pre-created, but this is a LAN machine, so it should use the LAN security group. Otherwise it can't communicate with other machines within that network. The key pair doesn't matter because it's a Windows machine, but it's pre-chosen, so that's okay. And that's all you have to do. Then you click Launch Instance. and then it will start up. It will take, Windows machines take a little bit longer than Linux machines, and that's because they have this boot up sequence when it's new. You can look at it by clicking on the machine and then go to the console, and you will see that it's booting up, and it can take a couple of minutes. So during that time I can show you how you create a Linux machine, and then we can try to connect to that from within this machine. So then you can use the launch instance, and always use the education, and from the source we choose image again, and we do not create the volume, and we choose Ubuntu 18.04, and for flavor you can get around with 500, a half a gig, that will be okay, or around 1 gig. The network, we can choose LAN for this, but here it's important that we have a key pair file, but it will be always chosen since you only have one. You should not create your own one, because then I can't access your machines. And then we'll launch that one. Then we can have a look at the jump machine again, and the console. It's still booting up. And for these machines that are accessible from the internet, it's really hard to have a good password. I would say that it's always good to have a good password. At your login here, there would be a Windows password that you should use, but I know special characters can be hard to enter to this web terminal, and that's why when you create the machine the first time, you maybe have to use your own password, but then you change it later on. But you should not use password 123 anyways. So maybe you have a password that you know that it's hard, you can use that, but then you will switch over to the one that I have gave you, because then I can help you more if you get stuck. This is the startup process for Windows machine. So just click through the wizard. We will use Express settings, and then it's time to create an account in just one moment. So as this is going through, the question later is, how do you connect to this machine from the outside world? When it comes to Windows, we use something called an RDP client, Remote Desktop Protocol. And there are clients for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, but you need to find a client. I would recommend to use the one that Microsoft had created, because it usually works quite well. And if you're on Mac OS, then you will find that in the App Store. Just search for Remote Desktop and you will find it. In Windows, if you have a Windows machine, then there is a client already installed. So that's quite easy. In Mac OS, the client looks like it. It will look a bit different, but you can then add machines from here if you have a public IP. Okay, so we will create a local account for this machine. It will ask for a name. and then I will have a password. And then it needs a password hint. So this password should be the one that you will find here if you click this one. But usually I have passwords with special characters and they are hard to enter in this terminal, in the web terminal. That's a bug, but we haven't figured it out. You can choose this keyboard and enter it if you want to, but I will show you later on how you can change it an easier way. But don't use a easy password here. So we'll click next. And then it will start up the process. It will take some time, and that's just how it is with Windows. So in the meantime, I think, yeah. Let's say that you are having, let's pretend that this is my client, the one, your computer, where you should be able to get access to the CS Cloud environment and the machines. So what you need for accessing Windows-based machines, or the jump machine anyway, you can use remote desktop. And if you just type remote, it will find this client. It's always installed on Windows machines. And here you will enter the public IP address that I will show you later on how to connect to the Windows machines. But when it comes to Linux machines, we administer them from the terminal. So you need a terminal that has access to something called SSH, or an SSH client. And the built-in terminal in Windows doesn't have one. But hopefully you have already installed Git on your computer, and Git has a bash terminal which has SSH installed. So if you don't have Git, you go to Git's homepage, git-sem.com, and install Git for Windows. If you have Linux or if you are running Mac OS, the terminal is based on bash already, and then it has a SSH client. But I have installed this on this machine, so then you get this type of terminal, and here you have the command SSH, where you can then get access to your machines. But to be able to get to those, you need the key pair, or the key file, and you can get that on the course homepage. If you go to the course, then you have to log on. I'm just entering my credentials. Like so, and when you are logged in and go to the Lab Cloud, you have your key, a link to your key pair here. It will download, and you can see when you extract these files that you have two files, because they are two different. They are the same private key for that you will use, but there are two standards around how you create these private keys. SSH, use 1, and if you use a terminal called PuTTY, you can use this. But I would recommend that you use the bash terminal, and then it would be this SSH file. You will need to extract them. Somewhere where you know where it is, because you need to locate these later on. Okay, so now we have the client set up. So let's look at our Windows machine if it's ready to be connected to. Yes, it seems that way. So what we do have to do now? Now we can access this within this web terminal console. But that's not really good. You can do most of the parts here, but it's, as you can see, the mouse is a bit laggy, and it can be hard to enter different characters and stuff like that. So I would recommend to use the remote desktop client. If we go back to the instances, and this is something that happens quite often, that you get logged out, you just have to log in again. Okay, here we have my Linux machine and my Windows machine. But as you can see, these are private addresses. You need a public address to be able to access them. And I then can assign this. If I click this arrow down, assign floating IP. I don't have any allocated, so I have to hit the plus sign. And we will have one pool. Then we'll allocate that IP, and then we can assign that to this Jacob's Jump client. And you will then see that I have these two IP addresses. And this is a public IP, which is routed through LNU's network to this virtual machine. So if I copy that and then go to my remote desktop client. So this is my machine where you, or your machine where you will be able to access it. So just enter that IP address and hit connect. But you can't connect to it. So why is that? That is because of that firewall that I was talking about. So within the OpenStack environment, we have also a firewall, and that's controlled with security groups, and you do them in the network part, security groups, and you see that we have these. You should not modify any of these. You should create a new one, and we can call that RDP for remote desktop. And then you can manage rules, and here some rules have pre-created stuff for, like DNS, web, and other known protocol. And here we have RDP, because otherwise you will have to know what ports you need to open. I know that RDP as standard has 3389, so you could have entered it by the custom rule. But if there are a rule, then you can use that one. And as we can see here, it has added an ingress. So these first are just that traffic is allowed out from this network. Okay, so now we have a security group, but we haven't assigned that to any machines. So if we go back to Jacob's Jump client and go to Edit Security Groups, we see that it has the default and the LAN. You shouldn't delete these ones, but it also had this RDP. So you can add that and hit save, and right away you should be able to, as soon as it has been added, you should be able to connect to your machine. Yeah, it will ask me for my password. So it was Jacob admin. and my password. And then you have to agree the certificates on the machine. You have to allow that one. And now I'm connected to that virtual machine. So this machine is this machine. You can see if I go to the console, I'm now logged out because I'm signed in on this machine. Okay, so what's the first thing I would like you to do here? Because the nice thing with this is that now you have access to the clipboard. So if you can cut and paste stuff. So now you can add that more difficult password that I would like you to have on all your Windows machines. So you can right click and go to the computer management. And in this tool you have a lot of tools to administer your Windows machine, but one of them is the users. So if you have users, and here we can see that the administrator account is disabled. We have an admin account, but we don't use that one. You have created your own one, which you can use. And if you right click that one, you can set the password. And here you can go to your and copy the password. I will just get the camera again so I can copy my password. And then I can just paste in this more difficult password. So if we now disconnect from this client and then open up RDP again and enter, I have to use the new password, of course. But hopefully then you can remember this hard password. And yeah, it works. So you should do this on all your Windows machine. If you can't enter my pre-created password right away in the web console, that's up to you. Because now this machine is secure, but you can now access it from the internet. Okay, so let's look. I can minimize this window. So still see it down here. I now would like to access the Linux machine. Then I could, on this jump machine, I would prefer you to install the git bash and then add your keys here, because then you can access your Linux machines without adding a floating IP. You can use the private IP address. So I would recommend setting up this jump machine with all the tools that you need for it. The first thing that I would install also is another web browser, because Edge isn't really good with the OpenStack web graphical interface. So let's install that one. In the meanwhile, while that is installing, we then can install the git bash. So you just search for git Windows, and then you can install the 64-bit version of Git. And it's downloading. can install let's see what Windows wants us to do. Downloaded 2 of them. You only need 1. And these installers, you just follow the default settings. You don't have to do anything special to make this work. So now we have a better web browser. And then we will install git bash. Make sure that you install the git bash so you don't leave that one out. And I think you don't have to choose any special settings here. In the meanwhile, I open up 2 of them and downloaded 2 of them. So you can go to the course homepage again from this machine so that you can download your keys. So course press. And then go to this course. Then you have to log in again. And you download the key file. And then you need to place these key files. You actually only need the SSH key, so this one. But you need to add at some place where you know what it is. I usually have a folder in my user catalog, Jacob admin. And then you can add a folder where you will have these kind of things. Dev or something. And then we can put the file there. So now we have our SSH key. You don't, if you want to use PuTTY, it's okay, but that's a different SSH client. Okay, so then we can launch the git bash terminal. And hopefully I can go into the dev and then dev. So now I have gone into this folder here where I have my SSH key. So if I list it with ls command, you can see that file. So how do I then use that file and connect to this? Well, first off, we need to look at the machine, the instances, what IP address it has. So as you can see, this hasn't a floating IP, it's a private IP address. And you see that they are in the same network. So I should be able to ping that one. If that is accepted in the firewall rules, maybe that isn't so. Let's first see if I can connect it to it with SSH. You then type SSH, and then you use the -I, and the -I is indicating what identifier file you should use. So it's how you should identify yourself. And we have this file to do that. And we can just start typing, and then if you hit the tab key, it will then fill out the rest if you don't have any more suggestions. And then it's an Ubuntu machine, and the default user is Ubuntu. And then you use the @ key, if I can remember how to do that in Windows. No, that one. And then the IP address of that machine. So I can just paste that one. And then you should be able to connect to it. But it doesn't seem that way. I have to think. What did I do wrong? Okay, let's see if I did the correct security group on the Ubuntu machine. No. When I created that machine, the Ubuntu machine, I forgot the network. So the security group. So even if it's in the same network, you need to have the correct security group. That's why I've pre-created this. So it's in the LAN, it has to have the LAN security group also. That's probably why I couldn't ping the machine also before. So okay, let's try that command again, and voila, we then can connect. The first thing, when you connect with an SSH key, it will tell you that you need to accept that fingerprint. So you type yes, and then it will be added, and you don't have to do that again. So now I am on the Ubuntu machine. So I am now connected with RDP to a Windows machine. That are a virtual machine. It's this machine. And from that machine, I then connect to the Ubuntu machine. If I would have a Windows machine that I would like to administer, I don't have to assign another floating IP to that one. It will get a private IP address, and then I would use remote desktop client on this machine. So that's why I call it a jump machine, because you use that machine to jump to other servers. Okay, now I don't have any other Windows machine to connect to, but it's the same process that I show you how to connect to it before, when we connected to this remote machine. Okay, the commands I show on this machine will be on the Ubuntu machine, this machine. So if we look at the network again, we now will see that the graph has changed a bit. We now have in the LAN, we have two machines. So we have the Ubuntu and the Windows machine, what I'm using to jump from. But within the DMC, since you don't have a Windows machine there to jump to, and you probably won't be using Windows machine there, and most of these machines will be publicly accessed because that's why they are in the DMC. It's probably a DNS server or a web server. Then I would say that you need to have a floating IP on them. So then you need to access them with SSH, and that you can do from your own machine. That's why I recommended that you install Git Bash on your own machine, so that you can then SSH directly to that server that you want to administer. The only thing that you need to do is create a security group for SSH that you apply to those machines. As you can see that this is only for those machines that have a public IP address that you want to be able to access them. So then you add the SSH, let's see where it is, there it is, the last one. And then you would apply that to those machines in the DMC. As you can see now, I didn't have to apply that to my Ubuntu machine to be able to access, and that's because they are in the same security group and in the same network. So that's why. If I exit this machine, now I'm back on this Windows machine, I probably should be able also to do the ping command that I wasn't able to do before, because they are in the same network. Okay, I think that's all you need for be able to do the first assignment, first lab. If there are any questions, I will answer them on Slack, and I also will be in Växjö tomorrow, or maybe you're looking at this later on Wednesdays, so I can help you. Okay, that's it. Bye bye.